Have you ever correctly had a gut feeling to dislike someone who, on the surface, was a cool person that everybody else liked? What's that story? Kind of related. Not a person but a dog. Years ago I had a GF who lived at home with her sister, parents, 3 dogs and a cat. One of the dogs was a big goofy lab that loved everyone, I mean everyone. 2-year-olds could climb all over him and he loved it. Anyway, the sister had been seeing some guy for a little while, maybe a month, and she's bringing him home to meet the family for the first time. The guy hadn't even come to the door yet. The dog was in the house and went ballistic. I had never seen anything like it. He went from goofball to apex predator. Needless to say, he couldn't come in the house. They had to leave. About 2 weeks later the sister comes home, he had slapped her and she ended it. She also found out that he beat his ex-wife before her. TLDR. Labrador could smell the evil on a wife beater. Edit. I am a human not a doge and I am a good boy. This is a great story, but for a second I thought the story was going to be that everyone loved this dog and you had bad feelings about it. My parents had this family friend when I was around 15 to 16. Friendly, funny guy who gave me the absolute creeps. I didn't want to be alone in a room with him, he made my stomach turn. Anyway, about 5 years after I moved out of home, he wound up in court, convicted of 3 very historic, back in the 80s, cases of ~~ sexual violation ~~ indecent assault of a girl ~~ under 12 when she was between 8 and 11, and 1 charge of rape of a ~~ girl under 16 ~~ 9-year-old girl. Sometimes our guts really know what's up. Edit. I'm that asshole that edits their comment after it gets popular, and gets the "you" poem _ for _ your _ sprog treatment. Holy crap, sorry. I wrote this comment at like 1 a.m. my time and definitely didn't expect it to blow up like this. When I woke up to my inbox, RIP, this morning I went back and double-checked the exact charges, and have corrected them in my comment. The rape victim was actually younger than I remembered. I'm sorry so many of you have experienced something similar. You feel it beneath you, or somewhere behind. The pit of your stomach, the back of your mind. A thought or a feeling that doesn't belong. The strangest sensation that something is wrong. It comes in an instant, and lingers about. A twist of suspicion, a trickle of doubt. A feeling remaining a moment or two. A vague understanding of what might be true. So open your mind if it's stubborn or shut. And trust the emotions that start in your gut. It might just be nothing, that notion you've got. It might be mistaken, but maybe it's not. Addendum. But if your mind is never shut, and if you always trust your gut, remember, when you feel it loop, perhaps you only need to poop. My sister's boyfriend. I just immediately found him to be very fake and disingenuous. But the rest of the family loved him and found him very charming. He owned a running store franchise that was more successful than the original store and was also doing well trading on the stock market. He sold the store back to the owners for a ton of money to focus on the stock market, but this was around the time of the market crash. So to help with that he worked at the store as a salesman. They eventually got married and bought a huge house. And that's when the cops came knocking at the door to their large home with a view. He wasn't rich. He never owned the store. He was only ever a worker and had been stealing cash from the register, products and selling them on eBay. The divorce came quick after that. The girlfriend and I used to work at the same ski hill, and the place was pretty much full of seasonal employees. Revolving door status. Anyways, she got this new dude in her department that everyone thought was a super nice guy. I did not trust him. There was just something about the way he talked to female employees that just seemed weird. He was trying to gain their trust way too quick. I made my sentiments known to my girlfriend and other friends and they thought I was just being jealous or something. I worked part-time out of town at the time, and he'd always ask me what days I was gone. It was weird. He also didn't have a car, so sometimes my girlfriend would give him a ride home and he'd ask her to hang out at our place when I was out of town. She declined. So at the end of the season, a female friend of ours and this kid decide to rent a place together. They weren't dating, and as they're in the final steps, federal marshals show up and arrest him. Turns out he had been on the run for over a year for kidnapping and raping a girl in a different part of the country. His family had been helping him, and he took the name of his brother while on the run. Filling out the housing application somehow tipped off the marshals. Trust your instincts. When I was a boy 7 to 8, at a coffee shop I would go to with my parents frequently there would often be a middle-aged Asian woman hanging out. She was a regular, the baristas knew her, my parents were friendly with her. Sometimes I would play board games with my parents and her. She gave me the fucking creeps, but I couldn't pinpoint why. My parents knew I didn't like her much but not the full extent. Anyway, the very first time I was with her without my parents there, they were starting the car or something like that, she tried to get me to come back to her house. She wouldn't take no for an answer and got pushy. When my parents came back I told them what happened and we never went there again. Edit. Apparently a lot of people are unhappy that I mentioned the woman's ethnicity. It's a descriptor, I mentioned she was Asian for the same reason I said she was middle-aged and a woman. My former handball coach. Everybody liked him, but I had a weird feel about him. After training he would come into our showers and give out shower caps for us to use, or in the winter, he would bring us snow to play. A few years later, he got arrested for sexual assault, when he went to a training camp with younger girls. Apparently he got into their tents and played with them. My mom was a single mom and did the best she could. However, she thought it might be better to leave me with the neighbor than at home alone. From the age of 6, I pleaded with my mom to let me stay home alone until she got home from work, that I would be okay. My intuition was right. The neighbor was convicted of multiple murders of single mom 1 and 2 towns over when DNA evidence came into being. He only liked to date and kill non-obese women. Fortunately my mother was fat. Yo mama so fat, she survived and lives a happy life. When I first met my birth mother's uncle I was instantly creeped out by him. He's in his 40s in a band, has heaps of friends everywhere he goes and gets on well with everyone. But I just had a horrible gut feeling and didn't trust him. He's a really touchy-feely guy and he would try and kiss us on the lips and passed it off as just being family. Turns out he touched my birth mom and had sex with her when she was a child. My mother let us as children hang out with her rapist. His son, my birth mom's cousin, is a convicted pedophile too and just recently got out of prison. I'm so glad I was in long-term foster care. But I really wish I wasn't allowed contact with my birth family, they are truly the definition of fucked up. Edit. He's in his 50s. He was in his 40s when I met him. Wait, so your birth mother knew and still was on decent terms with her rapist? That's messed up. Childhood sexual abuse is a manipulative thing. It's not uncommon for abused folks to remain in an abusive situation, sometimes their whole lives, say if their abuser is also their brother. There was an episode of Snapped, I think, about a woman who killed her father. Basically he raped her and her sister all throughout their childhood. Everybody knew but there was a kind of what can you do attitude, and he never went to jail or was formally accused. Then this woman heard that her sister was going to send her daughters to live with him for better education opportunities or whatever. The woman confronted her sister about it, but her sister seemed to think that it was no big deal. So, the woman called her dad out to a hotel. She accused him of raping her and her sister and told him to stay away from her nieces. He denied the whole thing and refused to stay away from them. The woman overpowered her father, tied him up, stuck cloth in his mouth, and castrated him. Then she called 911 to report a man bleeding to death and requested an ambulance. When they got there he was dead, not from bleeding out, but from suffocation. She didn't mean to kill her father, but I don't think she was too broken up about it. ETA, more info on her. A pastor who was involved in the community outreach program for a prison, which I volunteered to for the first time, seemed very friendly on the outside but seems really creepy to me. He kept putting his hands on my shoulder on that day and got my number from one of the volunteers and called me non-stop that night to say he is lonely and wants to talk. I was 14 at the time. Report him to the police. Unfortunately where I lived when this happened, these things won't be taken seriously by the police. That's terrible. Sorry you had to deal with that. Thank you smiley face. It's all good now, this happened almost 12 years ago and I've moved to another country since smiley face. One of my brothers was dating this girl, and everyone else had met her several times before I did since I was off at college. So the first impression I get of her is when she shows up at our house and just walks right in. Doesn't knock, doesn't let anyone know she's in there. Just walks her happy ass inside and sits on the couch. So then when I come down the hallway into the living room, the bitch had this super vapid smile on her face. I just had this weird gut instinct that she was hiding something from everyone and was going to fight to the death to keep it hidden. I expressed to my mom that she gave me a weird vibe and I got told to stop being jealous. But long story shorter, she ended up having an entire other relationship and life with another guy 3 hours away. Some girl started talking to me on the bus ride home. I thought there was something off about her, but my parents, who are inherently optimists, told me to be nice and hang out with her. They even invited her over for dinner a few times. She lived about a 4-minute walk away from me, so it was hard to come up with excuses not to hang out. We eventually hung out a few times and I found out that she was a foster kid and had gotten bounced around a lot. She was also on a lot of medication for bad joints, bipolar disease and a few other things. She was almost 18. Well, anyway, turns out she was having an affair with the father and they plotted together to kill the mom so that they could be together. They made sure to plan it during a time when the dad was out of town. The girl ends up stabbing her foster mother to death and the family's biological daughter is the one to call 911. They put the 911 tape up online and it was the worst thing I've ever listened to. TLDR, strongly urged by my parents, previously forced to hang out with a girl on my bus. She ends up having an affair with her foster father and stabbing her foster mother to death because the dad convinced her to. Their 14-year-old biological daughter witnessed the whole thing, sad face. Edit, link to the article thanks to, you, TicTac9. Link to article with 911 call. This is next level shit, 1 life ended, and 2 more ruined, all because some guy grossly abused his power over a minor. I feel so bad for the biodaughter's sad face. While in the army we moved into a new house in upstate New York. We were being neighborly and talked to a guy across the street. He had 5 kids. No wife. He also had multiple neighborhood kids playing in the yard. He told us we can always send ours over. He gave us both this horrible feeling, so we smiled and GTFO. About a year later my wife told me, I was in Kandahar, that his kids were taken from him. He had been molesting them at least ever since his wife died. The amount of pedophile stories in this thread is freaking me out. To be fair, it's not a thread about people who gave a good first impression and later turned out to have an exemplary character. Apparently, when I was 4 or 5, my grandma introduced me to some new boyfriend. Everyone liked him, but I would have nothing to do with him. Wrinkled my nose, wouldn't be left alone by him. I guess he just came into her apartment one day and walked at her with something behind his back, said nothing. She got an eerie feeling and said, "Are you going to kill me?" With a dead-faced stare he came at her. She managed to jump over some furniture and get away. She's always been in great shape, running 3 miles a day until age 80. She got somewhere safe, called the police and never saw him again. Your grandma sounds awesome. Leaping over furniture and escaping from a murderer. My stepdad. On the surface, he seemed like a good guy. Went to church twice on Sundays and once on Wednesday. Always helped out when someone needed help, whether it was something as simple as loaning $5 to something as complicated as roofing a house. Had a good paying job. Refused to smoke inside the house. When him and my mom went out on dates, he always made sure to bring home food for all of us, and toys for the younger kids. Would randomly take everyone out to dinner, or to the theater. Despite all of that, I disliked him from the moment I met him, even before he showed interest in my mom. People told me I was being paranoid, not to worry about. Fast forward a year. Him and my mom are married, I just got a job and was waiting on my first paycheck to move out on my own. My manager gets a frantic call that I need to come home pronto. My stepdad had been secretly spending all of our bill money on pot, we were about to be evicted, the power had already been disconnected, water service was about to be, and stepdad tried to kill my pregnant mom. Later on during the restraining order court hearing, he threatened to cut the baby out of my mom's stomach, and leave her and the fetus in an abandoned fridge in a field. Edit for those that are questioning things. He was buying an inordinate amount of pot, and sharing it among 10 to 15 people, daily. Not just enough to get high then, but enough to supply those guys and their girlfriends, wives. And yes, it was pot, not heroin. A few years ago, when I was still in college, I took a summer job at a movie theater. I met a lot of really cool people there, including my But there was this one guy who always gave me the creeps. We'll call him Drew. He was friends with almost everyone, including my so, and had been for years. We'd attend the same parties and he'd do all these little things that would feel like red flags to me, but apparently not to anyone else. Fast forward about a year. I no longer work there, my so and I have been together for maybe a year, and he has been promoted to manager. Drew has also been promoted to supervisor. It should be noted that there were a lot of teenagers employed at this theater. One day, two of the younger girls come into the office. If they were 18, they were only just to talk to my so. They tell him they're sorry, because they know my so is friends with Drew, but they have to tell him something. The younger one tells him that a few weeks prior, she was sitting alone in the break room, eating her lunch. Drew walks in and says to her, "Do you touch yourself?" She doesn't answer. He says, "Because if not, you should." I think he said more, but my so eas so furious when he told me that story that he was having trouble telling it. My so fills out the report for the poor girl and passes it on to the GM, who then informs him that Drew had 5 counts of sexual harassment on his file already. But corporate loved him. So they could never fire him. My so never spoke to Drew again. Last I heard, he was removed from his job at a brewery by security for sexual harassment. Many of our other friends are still very close with him. I don't understand it, but I'm just thrilled to have that creep out of my life. It's amazing how people choose to ignore multiple very obvious red flags. Thanks for watching our video. If you like it, please smash the subscribe and like button to support the channel, so that we can create more quality content in the future.